Some studies show us that if you abuse an animal, you are 5 times as likely to commit a violent act against somebody. And that's just one of the reasons why animal abuse and dogfighting is now a crime more cities are taking seriously.
And going out of their way to charge and prosecute offenders. Here in Baltimore, the numbers show a sharp rise in the people charged with dogfighting and animal abuse, a trend officials hope continues as a new training course for police takes shape.
Once we did finally get to the properties, they would have somebody that would stand at this gate.
This is not your typical lecture. These are not just students. What was learned in this room is a unique skill set meant to break an underground ring of silence, pain, and a hellish existence for the best friend of man.
It happens everywhere, all across the United States, every weekend. It happens everywhere.
Kyle Held with the ASPCA is part of a team that travels the area training animal control units and police departments on what they need to know to break up the vicious practice of dogfighting. This session was the very first for the BPD, but it was a class now becoming a permanent part of police training.
It's more of an awareness level to introduce some of the things involved in dogfighting as far as equipment and investigative tools for them to be aware of.
In here, officers learn the tools of this tragic trade, knowing what to look for while in homes and neighborhoods often investigating other crimes.
If you can imagine this is a dog's mouth, they insert and turn this to open the dog's bite.
Tools that otherwise would never garner a second look, like bite sticks, weighted collars, treadmills, and cages. Now evidence being taught to be almost as important as shell casings or fingerprints.
Things that you look for, and they may not be part of a crime, but if you look at them and then investigate a little further, you might see that it is part of dogfighting. Canine
Officer Patrick Hutter went through the first class. He says what he learned alongside colleagues at Animal Control was invaluable.
Have you seen a lot of these cases in the city recently?
Yes, I don't believe that that more people are doing it. It's just being brought to light that we are starting to look into them and realize that there are more cases that are needing to be investigated.
The officer is correct. According to the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, the number of people charged with animal abuse and dogfighting in Baltimore has doubled in the last 4 years, going from just 22 people in 2010 to 45 in 2013. A trend State's Attorney Greg Bernstein says is very much on purpose.
We've really focused on these cases for a couple of reasons. Certainly, you know, the harm caused to animals. I mean, there are certainly very vulnerable victims. I mean, that's obvious. But also, there's a strong correlation between people who abuse animals, use them in dogfighting, and other violent criminal activity.
Almost 5 times more, Bernstein says. All the more reason why convictions are key, although a much harder part of the equation. Dogfighting cases rarely have witnesses and certainly do not have victim testimony. Bringing a case is almost entirely evidence-based.
Traps, cages, treadmills that they train them on. They even have stands for the dogs to use for breeding purposes, special weights that they put on the dogs to try to build up their strength, scarring that you see on the animals. So these are all the kinds of evidence-based prosecutions that I mentioned in terms of building the case.
But like in most cases, convictions can be a mixed bag. In 2010, the city had 9, followed by a spike of 24 in 2011. The last 2 years, though, those numbers have slowed. But the cases overall are getting stronger, Bernstein says, punctuated by the exact kind of training Baltimore City is now offering its officers through the ASPCA. Not just knowing what to look for, but how to secure evidence and knowing the resources that can help make charges stick.
We've seen a rise in a lot of their cases after trainings like this. A lot of them feel more comfortable in what they're doing after trainings like this. So yeah, I think it's very effective.
Now, how effective remains to be seen. Like we said, this was just the first class held by the ASPCA for Baltimore City Police. The department says it is currently working to make it a permanent part of training for its officers. As for dogs rescued from fighting rings, they were almost always euthanized. But now the survival rate is higher and the future is much brighter for those dogs. For that part of our story, head to abc2news.com/infocus.